Paris plans to strengthen its support for Ukraine through investments in infrastructure, economic stabilization, and humanitarian aid, according to a statement from the Élysée Palace. French President Emmanuel Macron's new strategy emphasizes the importance of reinforcing international alliances, with support for Ukraine being a central pillar of France's foreign policy.
France's new international partnership framework is based on a policy of solidarity, especially in times of crisis, investment in response to major global challenges, and alliances that combine diplomatic and economic interests with those of our partners. From the Élysée Palace statement on the official website of President Emmanuel Macron. For Ukraine, this is a landmark decision, and it should not be viewed in isolation, but in the broader context of what's happening. It's part of the coalition of the willing, a coalition committed to supporting Ukraine militarily, with France and the UK playing leading roles. This document essentially confirms that Ukraine is a priority in terms of ensuring security. This decision creates a legitimate framework for future moves, such as the formation of new alliances.
Meanwhile, on April 12th, EU finance ministers are set to discuss the creation of a fund for purchasing military equipment, the European Defence Mechanism, according to Reuters, citing a document developed by the Bruegel think tank at the request of Poland. The fund would complement existing defense financing initiatives and would be established through an intergovernmental agreement. The document also proposes offering loans and allowing participation from non-EU countries, specifically the United Kingdom, Ukraine, and Norway. An additional advantage would be the creation of a unified European military equipment market, which would reduce costs and consolidate resources, the document states.
The European Defence Mechanism would serve as an exclusive procurement agency in specified areas as planner, funder and potentially owner of strategic enablers, and as a legal commitment to observe defense single market rules within the jurisdictions of its members. From the Reuters publication citing the document drafted by the Bruegel think tank.
The document is part of an ongoing EU discussion on how to fund preparations for a potential Russian invasion, Reuters writes. The EU is already planning to increase military spending by €800 billion over the next 4 years under the Rearming Europe plan. The initiative was proposed by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen at a special EU summit in Brussels earlier this March. As EU Defense Commissioner Andrius Kubilius pointed out, Europe must implement this large-scale defense initiative by around 2030, given the threat of a possible Russian attack on NATO countries.
By 2030, we must achieve NATO's defense capability targets. This is a very real and practical task for us. The European Union has launched a financial program for the so-called rearmament of Europe, which will allow EU countries that are NATO members to theoretically spend around 3.5% of their GDP on defense starting next year. That would mean around €600 billion annually if countries agree to such an increase.
Meanwhile, the Bundeswehr have announced large-scale military exercises simulating a potential Russian invasion of NATO countries, according to DPA news agency. The maneuvers will take place in Hamburg and will focus on the rapid deployment of Allied troops. The port city is set to play a crucial role as a logistics hub for moving forces to Europe's eastern borders, reported by Kristina Dombrovska, UATV News.
The Russian threat will persist for many years. The focus for 2032 is on how to defend NATO territory from the Russians. This was stated by Secretary General of NATO Mark Rutte before the start of the North Atlantic Council meeting at the foreign ministers level on April 3rd. In his speech, he assured that the US remains a reliable ally within NATO. Washington has no plans to withdraw its military contingent from Europe. However, the United States has interests in other parts of the world, Mark Rutte noted.
For many years, the Americans have told us, and they started 15 years ago, that they want to pivot more towards Asia, that there are issues in the Indo-Pacific the Americans have to attend to. That's one. Second, they have for many years told the Europeans, you have to spend more. And this really started to happen after Trump came into office in 2016, 2017. There are no plans for them to all of a sudden draw down their presence here in Europe, as I said yesterday.
I think there are tensions internally within NATO. There are worries and concerns what Americans' position might be, how it could shift from one day to the next.
The United States is more active in NATO than even before, said U.S. Secretary of State. Marco Rubio called the question of whether Donald Trump would defend NATO allies in case of need hysteria and demanded that NATO member countries increase their defense spending to 5% of GDP.
President Trump's made clear he supports NATO. We're going to remain in NATO. In order for us to in order for us to build the kind of NATO that has the capability. The events of the last few years, a full-scale ground war in the heart of Europe, is a reminder that hard power is still necessary as a deterrent. And so we do want to leave here with an understanding that we are on a pathway, a realistic pathway, to every single one of the members committing and fulfilling a promise to reach up to 5% of spending. That includes the United States will have to increase its percentage.
Currently, U.S. defense spending stands at 3.5%. The target for NATO members is currently 2%. Poland is the first NATO member to plan spending 4.7% of GDP on defense in 2025, said the Ministry of Defense of Poland.
We will continue along this path. 5% is definitely the goal we want to achieve next year. We are getting closer and closer to 5%. And even thanks to the long-term contracts we've signed, we will have to maintain a high level of spending for many years to come.
NATO will increase defense spending to strengthen security in Europe in response to threats from Russia, according to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Germany.
Russia threatens peace and security every day and every night on both sides of the Atlantic. That is why we, as NATO partners, will continue to expand the European security pillar as a whole. 800 billion euros over 4 years will strengthen our own security, because it is clear that the threat posed by Putin's Russia is a threat to all of us.
Meanwhile, in France, there is concern that the new 20% tariffs on all imports from the European Union, announced by US President Donald Trump, will harm the economies of NATO member states.
Solidarity, as I have already said, is unwaveringly required from all members of the alliance. Solidarity that is, however, being tested by the decisions made by President Trump regarding the imposition of reciprocal tariffs, which will have negative consequences both for the American economy and for the economies of all NATO members.
As reported by Politico, key discussions about NATO's future will take place on April 10th with the participation of defense ministers from member states. Then, in June, NATO heads of state will meet in The Hague. Reported by Alexandra Zaslavec, Kristina Dombrovskaya, UATV News.